That you're not that big into anime, but what are some you enjoy, if at all? I actually said this already, but I'll say it again. I enjoy older animes from like the 90s, 80s, and 70s. I enjoy the film noirish type animes such as Lupin the Third and Cowboy Bebop, Trigun and Hellsing and all that stuff. Those are the animes I enjoy, and I also enjoy the science fiction oriented animes such as Robotech, Gundam, and Macross. So yeah, I hope that answers your question, Zip. Alright, now we're down to the last two questions, and these ones aren't actually meant for me, but they are meant for my alter ego, Barmouse the Malicious. And they're both from To Mercy. What do you know? And he writes to Barmouse, "Why are you such a nice guy? You seem like a really easygoing ex-conqueror. Don't you miss dominating the skies? What did you do to entertain yourself for that long millennium of stone? Did you get back at that Gorgon bitch? I would have slowly carved off every snake on her head. You know, when you were Vlad the Impaler, didn't you feel like a junkie, a blood junkie? Being a vampire can be tough at times." Wow. And the other question is, Are you working on a plan to escape from that guy who's your host? It must suck having human restrictions. Where'd the name Varmalis come from anyway? It's badass, but you never told us as far as I know. Have you lost contact with your old buddies, the old ones? They seem like they'd be okay to hang with. If you had to choose the one thing that you hate the most in this pathetic mortal realm, Varmalis, what would it be? Yeah, as you can tell, I'm not suited to answer these questions, so I will step aside and I will let him answer from here on out. Alright, I'll see you guys later. Now I'm fixing to switch over to Barmouse. Later. Hey everyone, it is I, Barmouse the Malicious, aka the Monster from Hell. And I am here to answer the last two, or rather I should say the last two paragraphs of questions given to me by To Mercy. Thank you for asking me these questions personally, man. First of all, wait. Alright. His first question is, why are you such a nice guy? Don't you miss dominating the skies? Well, To Mercy, the thing about me is that I am one of the oldest, actually, scratch that, I am the oldest being in the entire universe. And to be perfectly honest, the thing about being an evil conqueror is that once you conquer the world, you're like, then what? You know? Eventually you get bored and then you want to go on and try different things, okay? So I've learned that being a really hostile demon, being basically like a horrifying monster, doesn't really get you far in life. Because I hear stories about all these other demons that take possession of these innocent children. And I look at them and I shake my head. You know, being trapped inside of a human's body, I've learned a lot of things. I've learned humility, and I've also learned the value of human life itself. So, you know, I tend to be very nice and happy. Alright, then he asks me, what did you do to entertain yourself for the millennium of being turned to stone? Well, that's the thing, though. When you're turned to stone, you're not exactly conscious. It's not like I was completely aware of being turned to stone for like that 1,000 years, okay? It's kind of like falling asleep and waking up. You wake up as soon as you fall asleep, or so it seems because of the passage of time. That's sort of the way it was for me when I was frozen in stone. Did you get back at that Gorgon bitch? Oh, yes, I did. Oh yes, I did. Not only did I rip off every single snake on her head, one by one, extremely slowly and painfully, but I made her eat every single snake on her head. In fact, let me show you something. Sorry about that. I had to change the camera angle here. But no. Feast your eyes on this. Behold, the sword of eternal flame, forged in the ninth circle of hell by the archdemon Beelzebub. The hilt is grafted from the horn of a minotaur, and the blade is carved from one of the long teeth of Cerberus itself. Andromelech commissioned the archdemon Beelzebub to craft an enormous death claymore for me, and with this sword I tormented the unfortunate Gorgon. I sliced off every snake from her hideous head, and I force-fed it to her while I slowly ripped open her chest and ripped out her organs with my bare fucking hands. So yeah, I got revenge on that bitch. And this is the sword I got in return. It's about a good 7 feet long. Now it's about like a good 4 or 5 feet long at the most. I've used it as long as I've been free from hell, to fight in wars, to fight in battles, all kinds of stuff. But as you can see, that's a pretty big sword. So I couldn't just walk around as a human carrying that big son of a bitch on my back. So as a human, I created another sword. The sword of eternal agony and death. I created this sword myself. In my days as Vlad the Impaler, I used this sword as sort of a siphon to transfer all of my undead energy and hatred and all my negative feelings into that of my victims, thus making them vulnerable for me to suck their blood. This is basically the mortal version of, this is basically like the earth version of the Sword of Eternal Flame. It carries all the same powers, it's just that whenever I'm a demon, I use that one. But when I'm a human, I use this. So yeah, I hope that clears things up. Alright. Whoops. Where did I put that paper? Ah, there it is. Okay. When you were Vlad the Impaler, did you become a blood junkie? Now, I think the first part of that question I kind of answered, but I think I should explain it a little more. You see, when I was a vampire, when I became known as Vlad the Impaler, I was basically, when I started out young, then I would travel from like Europe, from like country, from like village to village in medieval and all throughout Europe, and I would seduce young women under my influence, and I would kill them by sucking their blood, because I was just a really charming and handsome son of a gun. But now, whenever I went older, when I became older, I started to appear more hideous, and my beautiful good looks were starting to diminish. So I sort of lived like a hermit a little bit, and I lived in a castle out on the outskirts of Yugoslavia, and this is where I built. And as an old man, I would just kill and eat any passengers by. But then I returned to my home country of Wallachia, and I started impaling some more so that I could drink more blood. But then eventually I got so old and desperate that I just terrified that whenever I got old, my demonic features were starting to flare more, so I decided I would terrorize this superstitious little village in Europe and demand that they make a human sacrifice to me every year. And they would have to take the most beautiful, most pure girl in the whole village, and they would have to give her to me. Eventually, as I got older and weaker, I started demanding 2 beautiful, innocent, pure girls, and then 3, and then finally I died. So yeah, I went around and I had quite a body count of drinking people's blood and eating people, but I never became what you would call a junkie. Okay, moving on to the next paper. You ask, are you working on a plan to escape from that guy who's your human host? Now, when I was first bonded to Ian's soul, I wanted to escape dozens of times. I tried to escape many different times, but as time went past, I sort of grew more attached to him, and I started to learn the value of human life. And so I decided, hey, you know what? I reckon I better just settle down too and try to live like sort of a normal human life like the person who's my host. And I can't seem to find a spell or any type of magic that'll actually release me from him. So I really don't, there's no way for me to escape him. There just isn't. Where did you get the name Barmouse? Well, that's an interesting question. And believe it or not, it actually has a history behind it. You know the old legend of Alucard, and how Alucard is Dracula spelled backwards? Well, my name, Barmouse, is actually the word Shulamrav, which is Malaysian for demon, for like fiend or demon or hellspawn. But it was actually part of a phrase, a long Malaysian phrase, Shulamrav Nirkish Most Nariyad Nonanasam Monat, which translates to the fiend with no face to talk with. Now, you may notice one thing about my face is that it resembles a blue skull, and I never move my mouth when I talk. That's a side effect of being bonded with Ian. And since I lost most of my demonic godly powers, and since all the decay I went through when I was Vlad the Impaler, my ugly, grotesque features were starting to become more prevalent, which is why I never really spent much time in the form of either Heinrich Himmler or Joseph McCarthy, which is why I decided to quit taking the forms of certain humans, and at that same time, I was starting to take the forms of more like urban myths and more monsters. Now, thankfully though, my body hasn't decayed anymore, because since my spirit was bonded to that of a pure human soul, that's prevented my body and my spirit from deteriorating any further. But yeah, I use my telekinetic powers to speak out loud where everybody can hear me without even moving my mouth. So yeah, and that phrase actually came And that phrase actually came from an old, like, Somalian gypsy, not Somalian, a Malaysian gypsy who saw Ian when he turned into me briefly, and she yelled right out loud that whole phrase. And then I was thinking, Shulamrav. I like the way that sounds. You turn it around and you get Barmouse. I'm like, hey, that's not a bad name. But then I had to have like a subtitle. I couldn't just be called Barmouse. So I just took the next cool sounding word I could find, Barmouse the Malicious. And that's how I got my name. So yeah. I hope that clears things up for you. Have you lost contact with your old buddies, the old ones? Yeah, I have, but remember I told you that I was the longest living out of all the great old ones. I pretty much outlived all of them. So, I mean, but the one time when I was bonded to Ian's soul, that was when I was resurrected by this group of teenage cultists that tried to resurrect the spirits of the great old ones using the Necronomicon. But since I was the only surviving old one, the only one that they managed to resurrect was me. Well, not resurrect, but summon. And since I figured out what they were really up to, I went on a rampage and I started murdering them. But one of them, in a last-ditch effort of desperation, they cast a spell on me, which bonded my soul with that of a young 4-year-old boy, of a child, which was Ian. So yeah, I have had no contact with any of my good friends, the old ones, which that does depress me a little bit, because they were great friends. But ultimately, I've made some new human friends as well. Is there one thing that you hate the most in the mortal realm? Oh yes. I can't possibly name what I hate the most, but I can name a few things. One is that I cannot stand all these goddamn celebrities, like fucking Kim Kardashian, like Lady Gaga, all this shit. I hate these cunts who are so worshipped and glamorized by the fucking media. I hate that we are having all this shit about all these actors and celebrities' personal dramatic lifestyles forced in our faces more than the actual hard news of what's going on in the world and what's most important. So if I had to name one thing I hated the most, that would probably be it. Oh well, To Mercy. Those are my questions. I hope you enjoyed them. I hope you enjoyed my input. So everybody, it is I, Barmouse the Malicious. And my blade, my sword, the blade of eternal fire. And I hope you all have a good day. This marks the end of the first Q&A video. I hope you all enjoyed it. So, goodbye.